Bro, if you were to tell me in about 2021 or maybe even 2022 that the Knicks were going to win an NBA championship within the next decade, I probably would have called you insane. The mediocrity that the Knicks have went through from about 2017 to about 2023 was just so agitating to watch. We longed for the glory days of the 90s where Patrick Ewing and John Starks led the Knicks to two NBA finals and Latrell Sprewell as well. And in the mid 2010s when we had Carmelo Anthony lead us to a division title in 2013. But here are some core aspects that show how to make a real championship team like the Knicks did in 2026. After going to the Knicks after the 2022 season, the 2021-22 season, Jalen Brunson became the Knicks starting point guard and slowly improved over the next 3 seasons. But in 2024-25, that's when he broke out, getting all-star selection, just playing really well and becoming the captain of the team. But that year, he took a considerable pay cut, over $100 million less on his contract, because he wanted the roster around him to be better. He wanted the Knicks to go out and try to acquire some better talent so that they could have a better all around team. That is what a champion does. They're willing to sacrifice themselves, or at least part of themselves, what they could get to try to make their team better. The team was already pretty solid. Brunson leading the charge with OG Anunoby and Josh Hart alongside him. But the Knicks really splashed out during that 24-25 season, getting Mikal Bridges from the Brooklyn Nets, which was actually a player that Brunson went to college with. And in the middle of the 24-25 season, they made a huge blockbuster trade with the Minnesota Timberwolves to get Karl Anthony Towns. Towns would show up to his very first game as a New York Knick wearing a 1999 NBA Finals shirt of the Spurs and the Knicks from the Knicks when they last made it to the NBA Finals. And he would go on to help them go all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals. The team looked like they were gelling together really well. However, the Eastern Conference Finals, the Knicks just weren't consistent in that series and ended up losing in 6 games to the Indiana Pacers. But I honestly was fine with that. The team hadn't yet gelled with Karl Anthony Towns very well. He had been here for a very short time, and you saw how far they were able to go in the playoffs. They were able to go on such a deep run on a team that was still getting used to each other and hadn't played in many games. It looked like the 2025-26 season, there was nothing but the ceiling to look at. And the Knicks would go on to play as if they were destined in the 2025-26 season. The team would play as if they were destined to win everything in the 2025-26 season. Now, Karl Anthony Towns had a full season with the Knicks to go on. Jalen Brunson, another season as the captain with his fellow players from college, Josh Hart and Mikal Bridges. This team looked like they had nothing to lose, and they cruised. They had their head coach Tom Thibodeau fired after 5 seasons, and they hired Mike Brown as their head coach to replace him. Who the last time he made the NBA Finals as a head coach was in 2007 with the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Knicks would storm through the entire Eastern Conference, ending with a 53-29 record. During this time, they also added a really important player in free agency, being Jordan Clarkson, and traded Dalen Terry to the New Orleans Pelicans for Jose Alvarado. As they went into the playoffs, the Knicks won the very first game of their first playoff series against the Atlanta Hawks, but they would go on to drop the next 2 games. Being at a 2-1 series deficit, it looked like the Knicks were in trouble. Little did we know that we would see one of the greatest postseason tears ever in NBA history, going on not just to win one, not just win two, but going on to win the last 3 games of the series, sweep the Philadelphia 76ers in the conference semifinals, and sweep Donovan Mitchell and the Cleveland Cavaliers in the conference finals to go to the NBA Finals on a 11-game winning streak. Making the NBA Finals for the first time since 1999 was a reason for the New York fans to go insane. And by the way, I feel like they're doing a little too much. It's a little ridiculous what they're doing when they celebrate. Like, I don't think you should destroy the city, but that's another topic for another day. Meeting them in the finals is probably a team on the biggest media publicity train in the entire league, being the San Antonio Spurs. The Spurs had been struggling since their dynasty years with Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, Robert Horry, and David Robinson, where they won 5 championships in 1999, 2003, 2005, 2007, and 2014. And they hadn't made it to the finals since then. But after Greg Popovich stepped down as the head coach after 29 seasons with the team, the assistant coach, Mitch Johnson, would take over for that year. The Spurs had been doing really well. They ended they ended their season second place in the entire Western Conference with a 62-20 record, and pretty easily made it to the finals, winning the first series 4-1 against the Trailblazers, winning the second series, this conference semifinals, in 6 games over the Timberwolves, and going 7 games with the Oklahoma City Thunder in a very competitive series where they were able to beat the reigning 2-time MVP Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. But the team was led by 7'4" French phenom Victor Wembanyama. Everyone thought this guy is the next greatest player of all time. We had never seen someone so tall be able to move so much and shoot so well, especially from beyond the arc. It looked like it was going to be tough, but the very first game showed anything but that. The Knicks were pretty much in control for most of the first game and ended up winning by 10 points, 105-95, to take a quick 1-0 series lead. But game two would show that this was going to be a hard-fought battle to the finish. The Spurs ended up scoring 34 points in the first quarter to the Knicks 25, but the Knicks were able to come back at halftime, and it remained a really close game throughout. But late in the fourth quarter, the Knicks went on a bit of a dry spell, allowing the Spurs to take a bit of a lead heading into the final minutes of the game. But at the end, the Knicks were able to charge right back, and by Victor Wembanyama selling by hitting Stephon Castle with the pass while he was unaware of it, and by foiling the shot at the buzzer, the Knicks were able to win the game 105-104 in a nail-biting end to game two to take a 2-0 series lead as they headed back home to the Garden. Game 3 was a game the Spurs had to win to not go down 3-0, and honestly, that one I wasn't surprised about. The Spurs outscored them in nearly basically every single category and were able to get the dub 115-111 to at least put their team on the board. But Game 4 is honestly what encapsulated the entire 2026 NBA Finals. The Spurs went on a tear to open up this game. They went on a run, and they ended up scoring 41 points in the first quarter alone and 35 points in the second quarter. And at some point right after the first half, or at least right before the end of the first half, the Spurs had as high of a 29-point lead over the New York Knicks, and the Knicks were looking for something. They head into the locker room. I don't know what they came with, but they decided to come with a really strong resurgence. After scoring 76 points in the first half, the San Antonio Spurs collapsed, scoring 14 points in the third quarter and 16 in the fourth. But you can't think they had a 29-point lead. There's no way they scuffed that. The Knicks 26 points in the third quarter, and in the fourth quarter made an insane rally. I think at some point they had like a 17-4 run going. And Jalen Brunson was just insane that game. He just wouldn't stop scoring. Karl-Anthony Towns was a beast inside the paint. OG Anunoby kept making threes. Brunson had a grand total of 36 points on the game. OG had 33. Karl-Anthony Towns with 13. But it was the final seconds that made this game so iconic. With just a few seconds remaining in the game, Jalen Brunson trying to take the lead from the Knicks charges into the paint, but the shot doesn't go in. The ball gets bounced around, and it ends up in the hands of De'Aaron Fox, who shows everyone exactly why he's getting paid $229 million, and charges into the paint instead of killing the clock and attempts a stupid shot that obviously doesn't go in. This has got to be one of the stupidest things I've ever seen, not just in basketball, but in sports. This is absolutely mentally retarded. Jalen Brunson has made a bunch of threes. He tries to make another deep three to put the Knicks up, and it bounces off the board. OG Anunoby runs deep into the paint because De'Aaron Fox decided to stop covering him, gets the tip in to put the Knicks up by 1 point with just a few seconds remaining. From the top of the key, they try to pass it to Castle, who gets completely obliterated by Josh Hart. And the New York Knicks take a 3-1 series lead after having the most insane comeback in NBA Finals history. The most points comeback in an NBA Finals since the 2008 Celtics, when they were down 24 points in a game and went on to win the entire series. And let's not gloss over the fact the Spurs were playing extremely dirty, getting away with lots of dirty plays. We saw what Wembanyama did to Brunson, basically threw him to the ground. Where is the flagrant foul, by the way? And multiple times they were playing insanely dirty, but they were not getting any calls for it. The Knicks were getting fleeced, but they were able to get a 3-1 series lead despite getting fleeced, making Game 5 a super pivotal game in not just New York sports history, but for Spurs history as well. And right away again, the Spurs did exactly what they did the previous game and jumped out to an early lead. The Knicks led at 5-4, but little did we know that would be the last time we would see them in the lead for well over 40 minutes. And the Spurs would continue to pounce, getting multiple points. Victor Wembanyama becoming a beast as he always was, out in the paint, outside the paint, and behind the on the top of the key. It looked like the Knicks were done for, man, as they were down as much as 15 at one point. There was only one bright spot during this time span, however, that was Jalen Brunson was continuing to put up consistent points on nearly every possession. And while Karl Anthony Towns, OG Anunoby, and Mikal Bridges and Josh Hart hadn't put up as many points, while Josh Hart was having a pretty respectable game, Brunson was pretty much carrying the show, and as they came into the second half, the Spurs had a really strong third quarter, outscoring the Knicks. But in the fourth quarter, Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart became the faces of the franchise. Josh Hart making a bunch of critical threes that needed to be made, and Brunson continuing to dive into the paint, making every single shot, every single fadeaway Jay he needed to get the Knicks closer to that NBA championship. In the final seconds, they were finally able to take the lead on a free throw and were able to hold it just barely for the final few minutes of the game. And the New York Knicks went over the San Antonio Spurs to win 94-90 to win the NBA Finals in 5 games, get their first championship in 53 years since the 1973 season. In that game 5, Jalen Brunson had 45 points after going 14 for 27 in field goals and had 4 3-pointers and had 13 of 15 free throws, as well as having 3 assists and two steals. It was an amazing game. And although Karl Anthony Towns fouled out in the final minutes of the game, he only had 1 shot on the entire game. So on the stat sheet, he looked like pretty much of an afterthought. But no, he was actually an insane presence on defense in Game 5, and we probably wouldn't have won it had he not been there. Getting 45 points in Game 5 of the NBA Finals put Jalen Brunson, along with Michael Jordan, of all players, to become the only players in NBA history to have 45 or more points in an NBA Finals clinching game. The last time anyone saw that was Michael Jordan's final game in 1998 with the Bulls against the Utah Jazz. Brunson would go on to be named MVP of the finals, as he rightly deserved, just how like he won the Eastern Conference Finals MVP. Brunson had a grand total of 32.6 points per game with 4.6 assists per game and 2 steals. But we can't gloss over the other players. OG Anunoby as well, having an average of 21.2 points per game and nearly one assist per game and almost 5 rebounds per game. Brunson had 4.2, and OG also averaged 1.4 steals per game. And we cannot gloss over his crucial 3-point making. Although he was making some goofy passes throughout the entire series and missing some easy shots, he made those clutch threes, and how could you forget that amazing tip-in game 4? The rest of the starting 5 also had some pretty respectable stats. Karl Anthony Towns averaging 13 a game with 10 rebounds per game and 2.5 assists with a steal. Mikal Bridges also averaging 10 points, and Josh Hart averaging nearly 8 points and almost 10 rebounds. They didn't have too many eye poppers on the stat sheet, but they were such instrumental players on defense. And as well on the bench, Jordan Clarkson made a bunch of 3-pointers in Game 4 that were extremely crucial to winning the game, as well as Landry Shamet and Jose Alvarado. But overall, if you were to ask me this maybe 5 years ago, I would have thought you were insane. The New York Knicks going on to win the NBA championship in dominant fashion over the San Antonio Spurs, who had honestly dominated the NBA in terms of publicity with Victor Wembanyama and Stephon Castle. And Wembanyama was going crazy. They were going way too aggressive. He nearly killed Brunson. The Knicks weren't getting the calls, but they still persevered despite the Zebras not playing against to their favor. But the Knicks did it. Knicks fans celebrated and tried to destroy the city. Again, we're not going to talk too much about that. They're a little bit insane, but hey, The Knicks did it. One of the biggest fan bases in all of sport finally got the championship that they deserved after waiting for over 50 years. And I watched that game live. It's something I'm always gonna remember for the rest of my life. Watching that game live, I watched it with family, and I had so much fun. I stayed up till 2:30 in the morning that night because just watching a bunch of random stuff like highlights and reactions and stuff like that. The New York Knicks, this is just something crazy. Everyone doubted the Knicks, like Stephen A. Smith and the freaking other news anchors, they kept saying it was not the Knicks. They were not going to do it. They weren't good enough. And that was basically the entire team, the entire theme of this team. This entire roster was basically just has-beens, as in their eyes. Mikal Bridges wasn't in his prime anymore. OG Anunoby was a beast at Toronto, and he finally was able to win a championship while playing in the NBA Finals, but people thought he wasn't good enough. Same with Josh Hart. Karl Anthony Towns had been in the league for 11 years with the Timberwolves and never managed to win a championship as the first overall pick in the 2015 draft. And look what and Jalen Brunson being the backup to Luka Doncic on the Dallas Mavericks for so long, and finally getting traded and putting himself as a starter to win the championship for his dad as an assistant coach. It was so emotional, so many things. The New York Knicks winning the NBA championship in 2026, probably one of the most iconic series the NBA is going to have, especially in the 21st century and in the last 10 years. So as the Knicks hold the Larry O'Brien trophy, I'll sign off by telling you, I hope you like this video. Please like, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.
Who let the dogs out? Who let the dogs out? We got some dogs on this team, baby. New York City is full of dogs, and we came to get it. Who let the dogs out? Who let the dogs out? Way to put me in the most